Everybody, thanks for watching. So real quick, I want to get into this video. So I talked before about, understanding DNA and how we came into existence and how the information surrounding that is not what it seems. There's a lot of information out there, of course, about how we crawled out of primordial soup and how cyanobacteria is basically the beginning of all life forms. And then we have, Darwin and evolution. And a lot of people like to go off of the Big Bang and evolution as far as how we're getting our understanding of how we came into existence. So I want to shed some light on this whole thing. And I put out videos about this before, but it's a lot more to get into when trying to make this connection and this understanding about how we came to be and what DNA plays a role and how DNA plays a role in how we come to exist, especially on the whole chromosome level, as far as it's becoming male and female. It's a whole lot with that whole thing. So the first reptile-like creatures to crawl out of the primordial soup were mammaliomorphs, right? So these were cold-blooded animals, and they came from a group called amniotes, right? So these would be basically before we start having animals with internal reproductive systems, right? So amniotes. So with these animals, it wasn't like sex wasn't determined based upon, DNA or genetics or what have you. So the gender would be determined based upon the incubation temperature of the egg. So if an egg is incubated at a certain temperature, that's what would determine sex, right? So far with these amniotes, right? With these mammaliomorphs. So we have this, and we have these animals crawling out of the primordial soup, right? And this is their interpretation, not mine. This is what they've given us. I want to make sure I break down what's being said and what's on the record. So on the record, we have mammaliomorphs from a group called amniotes. And these are egg-producing animals, right? Where the sex is determined based upon the temperature of the egg. Now, this is until we get warm-blooded animals that basically start, producing internally. And, the situation changes right here. So we have the egg-producing mammals or egg-producing reptiles, let's say, and then we have the internal reproductive organs of a mammal. So now we have the rhapsids, and the rhapsids would basically branch off from these reptile-like creatures and would eventually become mammals. Mammals are not evolved from reptiles, but they do share common ancestors. Mammals, as well as birds, are a part of the amniotes group. Right. So we have the amniotes group, which basically evolved from an amphibious ancestor. Right. So again, we go back to that whole primordial soup thing to where we have the cyanobacteria, and it's the first, organism that we know that use photosynthesis, which is the process of turning light into food. So we have this, again, sun, cyanobacteria crawling out of the primordial soup, giving life to reptiles and animals and mammals or what have you. And this is how we begin the whole climb up to human beings. And again, this is the explanation that they have given us over the years. But it's important to understand because there's a lot of holes in this whole thing. So now during this time where we have the mammals coming into existence, the mammals evolving basically, we have a pair of autosomes that begin to evolve and it would eventually give us the X and Y chromosome. Now, the X and Y chromosome we know is important because this is where we get male and female. We know the female carry 2 X chromosomes and the male carry an X and Y chromosome. Now, when a child is, being created, the woman gives the X chromosome, the male would give either the X or the Y chromosome. If a male gives the X chromosome, 2 X's, we have a female. If he gives the Y, an X and a Y, we have a male, right? So important. So they're trying to say the infancy, the beginning of this genetic, or let's say this gender creation happened sometime around where we have mammals coming into existence and we have this evolution, this evolving, or let's just call it a mutation of autosomes, which autosomes would basically be, pairs of chromosomes. And these autosomes basically evolving and giving us these X and Y chromosome. Now, it's important because, again, as I talk about in previous videos, it's understanding that if, the question would be, if a man comes from a woman, right, and a woman has 2 X chromosome, the man has the X and Y chromosome, where did the Y chromosome come from if he came from a woman, right? So if the Y would make it uniquely male, where did it come from if there was no male and we only get male as far as human male from the double X from the female. So where did the Y come from? And that's the big question mark, right? So you have to look at the whole thing and just understand the interpretation that they've been giving us over the years of how this stuff came to be. Sounds like a crazy science experiment to me, but it's a lot more to it. So now translocation is basically when genetic material gets moved in between chromosomes, right? So this is what they say happened. And it happened over a long period of time. In the first instance, they believe happened over 300 million years ago, right? So we have that. So we know that, both male and female, we have 46 chromosomes, right? We have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So that's in both male and female. So 22 of those pairs of chromosomes are basically non-sex chromosomes. The 23rd pair would be the sex chromosome, right? So that would give us the double X chromosome and the XY chromosome in male. Of course, double X in female, as I said before, right? So now the SRY gene is the sex determining region, right? Y gene. It says here, we come a long way in our understanding of sexual dimorphism since 355 BC. In those days, Aristotle suggested that the differences between the two sexes was due to the heat of semen at the time of copulation. Hot semen generated males, whereas cold semen made females. We know where we get that from, what I talked about with the eggs being incubated at a certain temperature. And that's probably where that came from. Thankfully, we now know a little more about the molecular events of sex determination. Usually, a woman has two X chromosomes, the double X, and a man one X chromosome and Y, XY. However, both male and female characteristics can sometimes be found in one individual, and it is possible to have XY women and XX men. And this is something I've been talking about before. Analysis of such individuals have revealed some of the molecules involved in sex determination, including one called SRY, which is important for testis formation. SRY, which stands for sex determining region, Y gene, is found on the Y chromosome in the cell. It binds to other DNA and in doing so distorts it dramatically out of shape. This alters the properties of the DNA and likely alters the expression of a number of genes, leading to testis formation. Most double X men who lack a Y chromosome do still have a copy of the SRY region and one of their X chromosomes. This copy accounts for their maleness. However, because the remainder of the Y chromosome is missing, they frequently do not develop secondary sexual characteristics in the usual way. Since human SRY is similar to SRY of mice, a model of SRY function has been developed in mice. This has been particularly important in discovering the interactions of SRY with other genes in male sex determination. So what does this sound like? It sounds like the whole explanation I've been giving you guys over the years and what Ivan von Sertova talked about when he was saying how men are just mutations of women, right? So testes will be dropped ovaries, right? Or our penis would basically be an elongated clitoris, and we have breasts. So this is the same thing it's talking about. And it's giving you the mutation, but as I told you guys before, this is in the medical dictionary. So what it's talking about here with the SRY and understanding what this is about is, again, when you just pay attention to the jargon, it's giving you an understanding how someone can be homosexual, right? Plain and simple. You can see it right then and there. It's genetic. Again, if people don't understand that a straight male, in no way, if you're a straight male, there's no way you're going to be attracted to another male if you're a straight male. There has to be something genetic with that. And it's something that we know is genetic and we know how the whole thing comes about. But of course, they're not going to release it to the public because then you can't use it to keep the people separate. But clear as day, right there. So whenever we're getting into evolution, it's the same stuff that comes up. It's always a common ancestor, common ancestor. And I broke the whole thing down before when giving you guys the evolution chart, right? So in that whole thing, I showed you guys how we're supposedly having a common ancestor. We don't evolve from primates or chimps, that we share a common ancestor. We don't know what the common ancestor is. It's the whole missing link theory, right? But the whole thing is, again, when you look at their evolution chart, there's no way they should be able to give us anything past that missing link if they don't know what the missing link is. So if you don't have the missing link, you don't know what it is. How do you know that the Asian Homo erectus, all these other beings came into existence if you don't understand what was before them or what that missing link is? And when you look at the chart, Homo australopithecus africanus, we have the Lucy and the missing link, Homo erectus, Homo sapien, the Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthal, and then of course Homo sapiens, right? So again, this thing was first really put together so they could say that white people were here first, because early humans were supposed to have mated with Neanderthals, and that's how Europeans came to be. But if you look on the chart or you go through the understanding, they give you early humans and they give you modern humans, right? So Homo sapiens is supposed to come from modern humans, which Homo sapiens is supposed to be, where African people come from. So again, if you believe the whole Neanderthal theory or what have you, you would have to believe also that Europeans were here first, or their ancestors was here first, meaning that they were here first, and we are a part of the modern humans group, not the early humans group. So what have they been telling us for years? They've been telling us that Europeans, Asians, they have Neanderthal DNA, right? The African people do not. Trying to make it like we are just this separate people. We are not human, and the real humans supposedly have to be mixed with Neanderthals, right? But Africans don't have this mixture, right? Now, what came and bust this whole thing up? As I talked about before, I gave you Dr. Keith Chang and his whole discovery with the gene that he found that caused a genetic mutation. He found it in zebrafish first. So Dr. Keith Chang basically found the genetic mutation that occurred and basically changed dark skin into light skin. And they've been trying to get around this whole thing for a long time. So we had Dr. Keith Chang put that out. We have the actual mutation. So there is no debate for anybody who don't want to believe it. We have the mutation. So we have that. We have TED come out and do multiple TED Talks on the same thing, basically telling the world that, hey, Africans was here first and you people basically evolved or mutated from black skin. And I showed you guys all of the proof that comes with the whole thing with OCA, which is ocular cutaneous albinism, right? So with OCA, you have different traits of OCA. Africans are the only people to carry every single trait of OCA, and OCA is hereditary. Every race has OCA. So if OCA is hereditary and Africans are the only race to carry every single trait, what does that tell you? Africans are mommy and daddy, right? So you get this, or the other races get this from this whole hereditary trait, right? So we have OCA. Then we have ocular cutaneous albinism, OCA. We have vitiligo, which would be a trait of that mutation, right? Where you've seen dark skin turn into white skin. You never seen white skin turn into black skin, right? So we have everything in place to show you that this genetic mutation happened. We have the mutation itself. We have the traits that exist in society today with vitiligo, with albinism, right? So we have this. So they had to backtrack because now the Neanderthal thing don't make sense. Because if we have this whole thing to where we can say that the Africans was here and that, we have white skin, we evolved. Now they're trying to make it mix. They're trying to make it like, well, you had some white people basically evolve or mutate from black people. Then you had others that basically came through the route of Neanderthals. Now, for years, again, I talked about this before in many videos, they've been saying this. They've been harping on it. Africans do not have any Neanderthal DNA, right? And now they got to backtrack. So here it is. Now it says, for 10 years, geneticists have told the story of how Neanderthals, or at least their DNA sequences, live on in today's Europeans, Asians, and their descendants. Not so in Africans, the story goes, because modern humans and our extinct cousins interbred only outside of Africa. A new study overturns that notion, revealing an unexpectedly large amount of Neanderthal ancestry in modern populations across Africa. It suggests much of that DNA came from Europeans migrating back into Africa over the past 20,000 years. So understand, even with that, what does that mean? Now they're trying to say that these Europeans came back into Africa and somehow created us, right? And when they backtrack, and they got to backtrack. They messed this up so much. They got rid of so many of the posts that was online because I had them. They're not there no more. So they had to get rid of a lot of this stuff. You can't even find it online no more. So they got rid of a bunch of that stuff. They got rid of a lot of the information the Smithsonian put out, because Smithsonian got to backtrack because they have all this Neanderthal stuff put out there. And obviously they clearly trying to say that these were, white folks, and white folks came first, because when you look at all of their depictions of Neanderthals, this is what you get. And I had so many people talk to me about XY chromosomes and genes and what have you, and how this whole thing came about. And the explanation that science gives us, again, it don't make sense. It's one of the reasons why I did this video. So when you look at all the information that's official, that's put out there, and you just use common sense, none of it really works. It don't fit with what we know and what we see today, especially since they're talking about this stuff happening, 300 million years ago, right? You have cyanobacteria that's between 2.4, 2.7 billion years ago. And then only up until, 300 million years, we get in, XY chromosome. So, with reptilians, reptiles existing all this time. We know the temperature was completely different, which allowed for these beings to exist because they are, cold-blooded. They need the sun to basically warm them up to have energy or what have you. And then this mutation of what happened occurred in nature to where eventually we get the, beings crawling out of primordial soup. And we have these, cold-blooded animals or warm-blooded animals later on, which will eventually give us mammals and give us. And then it's just the whole thing. So it's crazy when you start getting into it, because it's really confusing, one, but it's a lot to read. But when you're putting it together, it just don't fit with what we know and what we see today. Because again, just like we talk about with the whole, primates and everything like that, you would expect to see this happening in nature. And the reason why they give us this millions of years time gap, because it leads you to believe that you have to wait these millions of years to see it happen, right? Again, I talked about dragons, and I talked about how dinosaurs used to be called dragons. But then we go and we see, 13th century paintings and 15th century paintings of dragons, these guys in whole fucking suits of armor killing these dragons. And I put the video up on my IG showing the guy reveal a painting that was hidden of this whole thing. So we know history, right, has been completely, corrupted. And they want to put us, around a time that's way further away from these dinosaurs or from these dragons or what have you. But we clearly see stories and read stories about these dragons existing. And it's funny because you got to look at that whole thing and try to ask yourself, why is it that we find in history these paintings and these stories about how systematically these dragons was wiped out, right? And then you start to go back and look at DNA, and you go back and you start to look at, where all this supposedly come from. And they're telling you reptiles, that, it's reptile-like creatures that basically started the so-called evolution, bringing about the existence of mankind. Supposedly our skin, as well as, bird feathers, supposedly evolved from reptiles, dinosaurs, or what have you. But it's weird that we have this connection, and then we have this whole dragon connection, but they don't want to connect the two. They're giving us all this other jargon and simply not saying what is clearly right in front of us, that is something weird and funny about this dragon mythology that fits in with this whole thing that we do not get. Now, again, I talked about Maria Gambudis and her having some of the oldest artifacts showing these reptilian creatures. It's something to think about, right? It's something to really look into. But as far as us coming into existence, to me, again, that is something that clearly to me was done in a lab. Something that just can't be the product of evolution and happenstance. Like, this is clearly, higher being. This is intelligence and process, right? Creating something this intelligent requires a high level of intelligence. And to me, it's not something that just happened as a result of a reptilian-like being crawling out of primordial waters, right? It just can't be. So again, when you start digging to it a lot more, a lot of the Darwin people, a lot of the people who believe in evolution, this is what they want to go with. It's something I simply can't follow. And I know a lot of you guys have questions on this. I got a lot of questions about this, but it's something that I have never taught. And I can't go that route because it just don't fit with, what we see as far as putting the pieces together. So everything I just talked about as far as, chromosomes and DNA and all that stuff, it's just stuff you got to really pay attention to, because they lie about everything. So I don't expect them to give us the truth as far as our genetic makeup, what that really is about. They can't even tell us what the common ancestor is. So how can you give us DNA details? How can you tell us what chromosome does what for real, for real? Like, this is stuff that we read and we have to agree with it and understand it just the same as we have to 1 + 1 is 2 or what have you. So it's just what we have to go with. But as far as common sense and looking at everything, it just don't fit. It don't go. We know there's a lot of holes and there's a lot of things that we find throughout history that makes this hard to accept. And the fact that they haven't given us the truth about, almost anything, you gotta open your mind to alternative understandings and thinkings about this whole situation. And then again, when we start to open the Bible and look in the Bible and see how it's coded in there, as far as what's really going on. Now, the dragon mythology, people can call it spooky or what have you. It's something you just can't ignore because we see it in ancient times before television. We see it in the Chinese zodiac. Of course, everything on that zodiac, as I always say, exists. So we supposed to believe the dragon don't. The dragon is on the Chinese zodiac. So everything else on there is real, but the dragon is not. So we have to look at that. We have to look at these stories. And we know how they methodically erase shit from history, right? So we got to understand that systematically things are being taken away. People are now looking at the fact that, so much cover up has happened over the years. You have a lot of people coming out and speaking on it, a lot of white folks coming out and speaking on it. But the thing, as far as us coming into existence, that's a tough one, right? Again, you're looking at the waters, and that's a big hint. The waters, the earth being supposedly mostly waters, supposedly space is waters, the whole firmament, as above, so below. And we don't know, right? We don't know. So, we look at these stories about this, you got to look at stuff like Wakanda, the water people, and it's a lot of stories, mythologies of people believing it's a whole underwater, civilization that's running everything, so-called Atlantis or what have you. So it's a lot of stuff to think about. So we got a lot to dig into, and there's a lot to really study before you start believing exactly what these people telling us, because they're not giving us any truth. So I don't like to really touch on too much of the super spooky Atlantis stuff. We know the stories. Plato gave us that he says he got from the ancient Egyptians about Atlantis, but it's something to really think about because the water context plays a major role in the whole thing. So we have that. We have the dragon mythology. There's so much surrounding all of it. It's tough to figure out what to believe, but you got to keep digging. Now, the people who, gave me the questions about chromosomes and about DNA or what have you, and how that plays a role in our makeup, it's right there. If you want to accept that. You can read it in the book, you can Google it, look at it online and read it and accept what it's saying and say, okay, cool, this is how we came into existence. This is how it happened. You can believe that. Or you can just look a little bit deeper and, ask yourself, how is it that, they straight up give us this? And how could they give us this if they don't know what this missing link is, or this so-called common ancestor? Now we have a common ancestor. They telling us going way far back, to, out of the primordial waters, the fucking reptilian-like creatures, what have you, which they say reptile-like, right? When you start to study this thing, you'll see that reptile-like. Okay, so if it's reptile-like, what's the reptile? All right, what is the reptile? Is the reptile they talking about a dinosaur? What does that go back to? What is the common ancestor then? Right? So what is that? So it's a mixture of what? What is that? And then to get the whole evolution from these reptilian-like creatures to us, that's crazy. You got to really make that work. And when you look at it on the scale, on the chart, it just don't fit, right? It don't fit. We know there's other, mammals that can lay eggs. We know platypuses can lay eggs and they're mammals, right? But for the most part, the majority of mammals have internal reproductive organs. So that's another thing to look at, and it's just a lot to take in when you're trying to process this whole thing and look for the truth. So for me, when I started doing this research, it was the albinism that gave it away, right? Because everybody know the whole story of Michael Jackson and vitiligo or what have you. It's something that I looked into growing up because I was fascinated with that whole thing. It's like, yo, this dude turned white. Michael Jackson turned white. How the fuck that happened? I really looked into it at a young age, and I was like, damn, vitiligo, and I studied it, and it was just weird to me, like, And you look at that, and you see the pictures, and you look at white folks, and you're like, this must be what happened to them, right? And then, you go and look at the official story, and they say, nope, that's not what happened. We basically, our early ancestors made it with Neanderthals, and that's how we came to be. And you're scratching your head like, that don't make sense. So when I start to see that, and then I start to study vitiligo, and then when OCA, because albinism, of course, is everywhere, OCA came up, and I was really getting into OCA and all the traits and everything like that. And the more you dig, the more you look, you keep seeing that whole OCA thing, the whole albinism. We have blonde hair, we have blue eyes, we have blonde, we have everything. We have everything that these Europeans have as far as traits in Africa and around the world. So that's another thing that just had me scratching my head like, okay, there's more to this. You know, where to dig, where to look. I go and look at DNA. I go and look at RNA, DNA, understand the genetic makeup of things and how stuff works, coding or what have you, and all that stuff sounds all well and good, but it don't fit with what you see with your own eyes. And for years, the official story has been that. And then Keith Chang comes out, fucks all this shit up. And I put that out as soon as I saw it because it was a big deal to me that he comes out. And this dude, remember, at the end of the video, she says, before we didn't have any concrete evidence. Now we do. Because we have the fucking gene. So anybody who wants to argue, I debated with people so much on this, and you can't debate the facts. You can't debate the fact that we have the gene. So if you have a bunch of hate in your heart, and you racist, whatever you are, you just don't want to believe it, we have the gene. There's no way around that, right? And then again, you see with your own eyes, albinism, vitiligo. You see white people, right, having these same type of features as these people with albinism. And the fact that Europeans have albinism, Asians have albinism, every race has albinism, and it being hereditary, and the only group of people, the only race of people that have every single trait, meaning they are patient zero, the originators, is African people, meaning you had to get it from them. It's the end of the story. It's the end of the story. So again, people got a lot of questions about DNA, and it's a lot of arguments back and forth that, oh, white people ain't even real. They come from monkeys or what have you. And I mean, come on, like it's too much hate out there. They look like us. Like, what's the difference? Blonde hair, blue eyes, but we have blonde hair, blue eyes too. What's the difference? So it's a lot of people got a lot of hate in their heart. They don't want to accept it. They fighting over shit we shouldn't even fight about. It's not even that deep. It's so much more shit to really get into besides really getting into race. Now, the whole gender part of it, you know, get into the whole double X and XY chromosome or what have you, that just really goes back into who was here first. Like, it goes back to what I was talking about with the Bible and understanding, you know, of course, you know, Eve had to be first. There's no way she came from Adam's rib, right? It's possible because the woman had to be here. And then you start to go into the whole metaphysics of it and understand, again, Adam, atom, Eve, electron, and all that stuff I discussed before. Eve means before, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, is all a parable. So it's up to you guys on how to accept all that. It's a lot of information out there, but I had questions on this, so I wanted to touch on it and really get into the DNA part of it and see if you guys can try to get it to fit within your research, because it don't fit in mine. It just don't. It's stuff to understand and know, yeah, but I go deeper. I'm more esoteric with stuff. I'm more occult with things. And I don't really accept the official explanation of any of this shit, to tell you the truth. I just look at it and say, okay, well, I understand what you're talking about, you know, where do you get it from or what have you. But as far as my research, I got to stick with that. And I've been right so far. So I'm going to stick with that. But it's still good to understand so you can know exactly what these people are saying and where to get their information from. So don't ever, you know, discount that. Keep doing what you're doing as far as studying your information. But as far as this whole makeup of, you know, what made us and how we came to be. And I said this shit before, to me, it's obviously a higher being, a higher intelligence that created us. And to me, there's no way around that. There is intelligence in our creation. And I always give you guys the examples of 20 hydrogen atoms creates calcium, which creates our bone structure. And if they know that a certain amount of atoms and elements create certain things, and he had to get these things together to create this perfect being, right? This is not by accident. This is somebody, you know, adding numbers and putting things together to create what they wanted to create it. And if we're supposed to be in their likeness or what have you, they supposedly look like us. Who the fuck knows? I just know the official story is not the correct story. The official story don't fit with what common sense is telling us. So it's just up to you guys to figure it out on your own and go with what you want to go with. But appreciate you guys taking the time to watch. Links are in the description for everything. It's a new link for you guys to join Merkabah Scholar Society and to get the, all the digital downloads. They have over 100 DVDs. All the videos is online. So a lot of people ask about certain DVDs. They're digital right now, so you can download them. I'm not selling DVDs no more. So a lot of people ask about those. The link is in the description for you can go and see all that stuff. It's a lot of videos, but yeah, still time to join. Price is still low. Take your time, look through it. And yeah, I'll see you guys next video. Peace.